spring morning, 1954. The overnight rain is cleared, and it's a damp start to what looks to be a rare sunny Saturday in rural Ireland. The roads here have been closed off to the public. 7.4 miles of the most beautiful undulating tarmac you've ever seen through the countryside to form one of the great natural road circuits, aptly named for the village nearby, Dundrod. Here's a 4.5-liter V12 powered Lagonda from Aston Martin at our disposal. Sat on its skinny cold rock-hard avons, it's best to be careful with your right foot. The engine needs some warming anyway. It's been preheated with hot water in the radiator, but take it easy on the first few rounds. After all, the crew just finished rebuilding it after Le Mans. So, what do you say? Let's go for a drive. Welcome to Dundrod. I'm rolling away from the start-finish area right now. Coincidentally, I did a video on a very similar version of this circuit almost exactly 1 year ago, actually. As I'm recording this, I released it exactly 1 year ago. And this is Jim Pearson's Dundrod, the 1950s version, which came out in an updated form that we're seeing here for Grand Prix Legends back in April of 2021, a little under a year ago at this point. And it's been converted, and as you can see, this isn't Grand Prix Legends, it's been converted to rFactor2 by S.Victor, who has been responsible for converting several notable Grand Prix Legends tracks to rFactor2 with the Targa Florio circuit. Beautiful rendition there. I took a look at the Isle of Man circuit from Jim Pearson as well, and here is Dundrod, the latest to be converted. We'll come down here to Lethamstown Bridge, tricky part of the track, and we'll talk all about the circuit and the different corners and things. But this was converted from Grand Prix Legends, but a lot of work has been done on it. It was done in conjunction or with the permission of Jim Pearson to convert it. Accelerate up here. And a lot of work has been done to it. So I know there's a totally new road surface. There's a lot. Into fourth gear as we'll roll to the top of the hill here. A lot of new vegetation and scenery and extended scenery and things. Come around the corner to Deer's Leap here, one of the most breathtaking parts of this track. Nice hump at the top of a hill to get your car upset. Down to the somewhat hidden corner of Cochranstown, second gear right now. It's a wet track. I'm driving Wutru's 1954 sports car mod, and talked about this being a Lagonda. It's not exactly a Lagonda. I've talked about this mod before. I did a video with the D-Type. I think the most notable thing anybody familiar with the Type will notice is I'm driving on the left-hand side of the car, which this I think almost definitely would have been a right-hand drive. Down to third gear here. This one surprises you. The 1954 sports car mod for rFactor2 is, in my estimation, one of the best classic sport car mods for the 1950s that's available for any sim. Don't let the slightly fictionalized cars fool you. The physics very much are real, and in rFactor2 it all comes down to the physics for me. But when you're driving around a track as beautiful as this, in a car as stunning as this, even if it is slightly fictionalized, there's just something so special about it. This next corner up here is Joey's Windmill, which is such a fun corner. We'll come through here faster later. You can go a lot faster through here than you'd think because there's a camber to the road. working the engine in 4th gear. Now this car, based on the Lagonda V12, was, I believe, Aston Martin's kind of experiment into using a V12 engine. They didn't first throw it in one of the proper Aston Martins. Back in the 50s, when you raced sports cars, you actually had to produce production cars that matched what you were racing. So they didn't want to use the Aston Martin brand for that. There were no road cars that would fit a V12, and so they used the Lagonda brand to test the engine. Ended up working its way over, I believe, to the main program. And in 1954, this car wasn't very successful. I think before the first test, it actually caught on fire and they had to rebuild it. And in Le Mans 1954, Eric Thompson spun out after a couple hours. I can see why, because this is very tricky to drive. I'm absolutely babying the car here, and we will get it up to speed in a lap or two. Down to 3rd gear here for the top of the hill. This is a long left-hander. There's berms on each side of the road, so you have to kind of thread the needle through here. Brake it sideways there, head down towards the hairpin. Now there are several notable changes in this circuit versus the 1960s version that I took a look at for Grand Prix Legends. But this is as the track would have been raced in the 50s, and there were sports car races here. Talk about it a bit in the other video that I did. Very tight hairpin. But 1954, 1955 RAC trophy, the 55 race was very infamous. Not a great race, partly responsible as well as Le Mans that year for Mercedes dropping out of racing entirely just with how brutal the event was. And you can see why. This track is more roads. It's just public roads strung together. Absolutely gorgeous and a pleasure to drive, but to do a proper race here is pretty wild. And believe it or not, if you're not familiar with it, they still race motorcycles here, part of the Ulster Grand Prix. Come up to just about the final corner, long right-hander, get us onto the front straightaway. And in my estimation, in this car is probably the fastest part of the circuit. Probably would be after Deer's Leap, the large hill, and most other cars, but getting the power down, so try to accelerate a bit. 4th gear right now, get it up to 5th here before we get up to the rock bends. Countryside just blasting by. Exhilarating is really the only word. Brake plenty early. This car will teach you the right way to drive, and it's one of the reasons I've enjoyed driving it so much. I've done a lot more, I guess I'd call it preparation, but just enjoyment around this circuit than I would normally do for a video like this, because it's been so much fun to drive. Like I said, the car is going to teach you how to drive right. You have to brake this car in a straight line. If you need to learn how to heel and toe, although this might be a frustrating experience driving this car, you can't not heel and toe in it. If you don't rev match on downshifts, you're absolutely going for a spin. Happy around there. It's 100% a test in throttle patience. You really have to egg the throttle. Very infrequently I'm actually going full throttle, partly due to the wet circuit, but I couldn't resist making this feel a little bit more realistic. We'll come around the top of Deer's Leap. You gotta be really careful over these humps. 2 of them, second one there, and then we go plunge down the hill. You can get the throttle down a bit. 4th gear. I don't know if I'm daring enough to put it in 5th. Over the second hill and up to Cochrane's. Want to brake plenty early. I'm sure you can go a lot deeper once you get the lines right, but this is a double corner and the second part of it sneaks up on you very, very easily. Into Ireland's corner here, left-hander. It's not so many of those on the track, on the circuit. This track, this circuit, is a perfect complement to the Isle of Man, which I looked at in a very similar car in the Jaguar D-Type replica that's a part of this mod. And I wanted to choose something different. That car would be equally as perfect around here. And really, any of the cars in Wuchu's 54 compilation would be great around here. If you want it to be a little bit easier, you can, of course, take the rain off. Let's go through a windmill here. Your stomach almost falls away from you as you think you're going to go too fast into there, but the camber of the road just picks it up for you. Same kind of feeling you get going through the corkscrew at Laguna Seca. Corner sneaks up on you, and if you don't know where you're going, of course the signs point to the right there, but you might be tempted to go straight. Luckily some runoff there straight ahead. But the 54 mod, like I was saying, features many different cars, and this is a 4.5 liter engine capacity. Sports cars in the 50s ranged from small sub 1 liter capacity engines all the way up to 8 liters, I believe, in some of the crazy American cars of the time. So really have the gamut to pick from. Every one of the cars feels different, especially on throttle and just the way the engines work, the suspension. It's a pleasure to drive all of the different cars that are a part of the set. So I do recommend taking a few out and figuring out the one that you like to drive. This one and some of the higher powered cars. Try to get around this hairpin again. Feed the wheel out, just kick the rear end around. So controllable, so fun. These are definitely a test in all of the driving mechanics. The car gets a little light over a bump, of which there are many around this circuit. Again, fully detailed road surface, so you're feeling all the different bumps and things, but it'll spin out from under you in a second. You have to be very careful on it in wet conditions like this for a few laps at least, and even then it's never truly going to get easier. Tires don't really warm up from this time period. Fourth, down to third, might be slowing down a bit more than you need to. It's somewhere between hot lapping and driving for me around here, and I don't feel the overwhelming need to go race. There's some cars where you get out to a few laps, say, all right, that's cool, but I really want to race something. There's enough challenge in this, combined with the circuit and how amazing it is to just sit and do this all day. Ooh, as I kicked the rear end out there, didn't quite rev match well enough. This part of the circuit, very different from the 60s version. I believe this whole part, Lethamstown Bridge, was removed and it's kind of straight lined. I was trying to review back the 60s version, and the modern day one, all of this was changed, which I think it adds a nice element to the track. Definitely one of the trickier sections though, and I can see as public roads, you might not want a bridge like that there. Struggled to get the power down heading up the hill here. About half throttle the whole way. Get it up to fourth gear. Help keep the revs low so we don't spin the wheels quite as much, and come up to deer sleep one more time. Get the throttle in it pretty good that time. Trees whizzing past. Down a second here. Go silent as I fear for my life trying to get around the corner. Graphics wise, I think this looks incredible. I know some folks that really care about high polygons and things will notice, 2D trees and might scoff at it, but I think they're quite nice and better than a lot of 3D trees that I see. And while you're racing, do you really notice 3D trees? These give such a good impression of scenery whizzing past that I almost would rather have them. Jim Pearson's texture work, which is the majority of what you're seeing here, if not everything, is incredible. He does such a good job at color matching and making sure things look proper in Grand Prix Legends, which is a sim that has very little by the way of shaders and shadowing and anything like that. So it all has to be done in texture work, and carried over to the sim, S.Victor's done a great job to make sure it appears right here too. Try to get it good this time into the windmill. Just dancing on the accelerator on the way down. Understeer a bit in the middle with the road. Oh, just helps you. I'm so happy this track, and a lot of these nice Grand Prix Legends tracks are being converted to rFactor2 in the proper way with additional details and making them really enjoyable. It's just going to open up a lot more folks being able to experience the tracks and the great work that Jim Pearson and others, have done for Grand Prix Legends. I know it's not everybody's go-to sim, and racing cars like this, it's hard to argue that it's very much at home in rFactor2. Done a first gear here. Very tentative. It's easy to lock up the brakes and you just kind of sail on in a straight line forever. Quite impressive to stand by the edge of the road and watch a 1950s sports car do that, fishtailing all over the place. Our way through the final few corners of the lap here. Use the throttle a lot to help steer the cars. We'll come up to the final corner. Notice it from the big hedge on the inside. We'll get on the front straight away. So a few laps, gentle laps around Dundrod. A pleasure to drive. I think I've had so much fun driving this over the past few days. Wanted to show it to everybody. This came out just a few days ago for rFactor2, and for those of you that have rFactor2 installed, I can't recommend it enough. I don't know if my feedback's been resounding, but it's some of the most fun I've had. It's a little more manageable than the Isle of Man, so you're not trying to learn a massive track, but it's obviously 7 miles, plenty of corners, plenty of ways to get into trouble, but a little more approachable. So in a couple sessions you could learn the circuit. Be fun to do some races around here, whether that be in these sports cars or something a little easier like light formula cars. Could be quite nice. So really massive credit to Jim Pearson for this amazing recreation of an awesome circuit. S.Victor for bringing it to rFactor2 and adding all the additional details and everything respectfully to make it feel right at home, and one of the nicest tracks that I've driven in rFactor2. If you don't own rFactor2, this plus the Targa Florio plus the Isle of Man and some of these awesome car mods, I think they're enough to warrant some of the frustration in getting it running and going. It's not too hard to do these days, so highly recommend it. Thank you for watching. This is GP Laps, and I'll see you all again next time.